Hello and good evening, everybody, and I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's episode of Album Rant. And I kind of, sort of, in a way, want to return to the world of Kiss, but not really. What I'm going to be looking at tonight is a very, very interesting point in the band's history. But before I get to that, I just kind of want to recap as to how we got here. In the early 70s, there was once upon a time a band by the name of Wicked Lester. And it included rhythm guitarist Paul Stanley and bass guitarist Gene Simmons. And they had moderate to no success at all. They had a really hard time getting gigs. So they decided to revamp things a little bit. They disbanded Wicked Lester and they decided to form a new band. They were then joined by drummer / lead vocalist Peter Criss, and eventually by another guitarist, lead guitarist Ace Frehley. And this was the beginning of the band Kiss. And they had 3 albums in a 1.5-year period, appropriately titled Kiss, and then they had Hotter Than Hell, and then they had Dressed to Kill. And there were some great songs from them, such as Strutter, Nothing to Lose, Firehouse, Cold Gin, Deuce, 100,000 Years, Black Diamond, Got to Choose, Parasite, Hotter Than Hell, Watching You, Let Me Go Rock and Roll, Strange Ways, Room Service, Two-Timer, Getaway, She, Rock Bottom, and of course, Rock and Roll All Night. But believe it or not, as far as the critics were concerned, those were moderately okay efforts, and they didn't really get very good reviews. But that all changed in the year 1975 when they released one of the greatest live albums ever entitled Alive. And it was absolutely incredible. And then after that, they had 3 mega hits right in a row, such as Destroyer, Rock and Roll Over, and Love Gun. And they had hits such as Detroit Rock City, King of the Nighttime World, God of Thunder, Flaming Youth, Shout It Out Loud, Beth, Do You Love Me, I Want You, Take Me, Calling Dr. Love, The Ladies' Room, Hard Luck Woman, Making Love, I Stole Your Love, Christine 16, Shock Me, Tomorrow and Tonight, Love Gun, Hooligan, Plaster Caster, Almost Human. And by that point, Kiss was on top of the world. And they then released their second live album entitled Alive 2, sounds legit, and it included 5 unreleased studio tracks, which included Rocket Ride, which was also sung by lead guitarist Ace Frehley, who is pretty much the subject of tonight's review. Now, here's the thing. Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley wrote most of the music. They sang most of the songs. Peter Criss usually had a lead vocal effort here and there on those first 6 albums, but his writing contributions were minimal. Ace Frehley, his writing contributions were also minimal. Gene and Paul kind of dominated the band at the time, but he never actually sang lead vocals on those first 5 albums. It wasn't until the Love Gun album where he finally picked up the microphone on the song that he wrote himself, Shock Me. And this was the very first time he became the lead vocalist. He again sang again on the Alive 2 album. Shock Me was on it. And of course, there was Rocket Ride, which is an incredibly underrated track. It's incredibly sleazy, okay? I'm guessing you can imagine what the rocket really is. But it's a great song, and it's got a great guitar solo. But anyways, after that Alive 2 album, Kiss was on top of the world. But internally, they were not doing so well. Mostly because drummer Peter Criss was a little bit agitated that his songs were often, overlooked, and he was often passed over by Gene and Paul. And he did not have a lot of writing credits, and he did not have a lot of lead vocal contributions. Even though his song Beth, which was on the Destroyer album, was the #1 hit single Kiss had ever had. He was still kind of sidelined. So, in the year 1978, they had an idea that should have been the greatest thing ever. All 4 members would kind of take a break from the band, and they would go off and record their own solo album, and they were all released on the same exact day in 1978. And this was kind of an opportunity for Ace and Peter to kind of, write their own stuff and make their own album and kind of create their own thing, which I definitely respect. And that brings me to the subject of tonight's review. I am going to be reviewing the Ace Frehley solo album. Now, as you can see right there, it is marketed as a Kiss album. But the thing is this, it's not really a Kiss album. In fact, it's not a Kiss album. It is a solo album, but I guess they threw the Kiss logo on there just to, I'm sure people were more likely to buy them if they were marketed as Kiss albums, so there you go. But, again, I am going to be focusing exclusively on the Space Ace tonight, the Ace Frehley solo album. So let's go ahead and see what we have here on the back. By the way, on this album, Ace Frehley performs lead vocals on all the tracks, except for the one instrumental. He performs lead guitar on all the tracks. He performs rhythm guitar on most of the tracks. He performs bass guitar on most of the tracks. And the drums are handled by Anton Fig, who actually started subbing for Peter Criss on the Dynasty and the Unmasked albums when Peter Criss was starting to show some pretty erratic behavior, but that's another discussion for another time. But you see right there, it is dedicated to Gene, Paul, and Peter. All of the Kiss solo albums are dedicated to the other members, so, they wanted to, pay credit and tribute to their bandmates. So we come to side 1, and it kicks off with Rip It Out. Now, this album, when you first hear it, you will notice it has a very, very slick and polished production. But that's actually a good thing, because Rip It Out absolutely rocks, okay? This thing comes in kicking. This thing comes in swinging. It is fast, it is sleazy, and it is everything I wanted. It sounds a little bit different from the traditional Kiss sound, but that's not necessarily by default a bad thing. I mean, Ace kind of made this album his own, and I love it. It's only about 3 minutes or so it's not like he's going off and doing prog rock or anything. I'm just saying the sound doesn't quite sound exactly like Kiss did, but that is totally fine. But I did see Ace Frehley's solo career opening up for Alice Cooper one time, and he did play Rip It Out, and I absolutely loved it. But like I said, it's got a great punch and kick to it. It's fast, and I absolutely love it. Then we have the second track, Speeding Back to My Baby. And this one is a little bit slower. I mean, it's got a nice guitar intro at the very beginning, but, you know, it kind of takes its time. It's got more of a grooving beat to it. This song, his wife, at the time at least, I'm not sure if he's still married to her, but Jeanette Frehley has a writing credit on this song, so that's kind of interesting. And there are some female background vocalists on here, which I don't fully care for. But again, it is a pretty strong song. I loved it the first time I heard it, but over the years, I have really come to discover that there is better stuff on here. Such as the next song entitled Snowblind. And Ace is not the first, nor would he be the last artist to have a song entitled Snowblind. Black Sabbath did it before him, Styx did it after him, and I'm sure there have been a lot of other artists who have done the same thing. Well, as you probably have guessed, it is definitely about drugs. Ace and Peter Criss also did have kind of a drug problem. Gene and Paul did not, allegedly, but the other two did, and it definitely shows up in his music, because this thing, it definitely feels like he was under the influence of something when he wrote it. It's still a little bit slow, but, you know, I don't mind it at all, and it's got a nice punch and rhythm to it, and I definitely would recommend Snowblind. Then we have Ozone, which tackles a very similar subject matter, and this thing sounds a lot more, I don't know how to describe it, but it definitely sounds a lot more drug-induced than anything else that was on here. I'm not sure if this is quite my favorite, because again, it's incredibly slow, and it's got, I don't know, a very fluid feel to it, and I'm not sure if that's really quite my thing. But, you know, it's definitely very drug-inspired, so I'll give him that at least. But, you know, so far, things are working very well, and he has had 4 very strong numbers so far. Then we have What's on Your Mind, and this one is a little bit more mainstream sounding than the stuff that came before it, aside from maybe Speeding Back to My Baby. But, you know, it starts out with a nice drum intro, and, you know, the lyrics, I think this is how it goes. You're breaking my heart, you're tearing me apart, you're driving me crazy, crazy. And this doesn't really seem like the thing I would probably like, but I actually do kind of like it. I mean, I could be wrong about this. I mean, I have not really fully analyzed these lyrics, but it sounds a lot more like a love story than the previous 4 songs on this album, but I kind of like the rhythm. And it's definitely not a pop song by any stretch of the imagination, but, I mean, I think it flows very well, and I think it's got a great rhythm to it. I actually do like What's on Your Mind, even though many purists would probably consider this to be the weakest one on side 1, but I really don't think so. But my favorite from side 1 is most definitely Rip It Out. It sets the stage so well. It's very aggressive. It's very, very guitar focused, and I absolutely love it for that reason. I think it's the best written, and I think it's overall the strongest song. Then we move to side number 2, and it kicks off with New York Groove, which is actually a cover. Apparently Ace was against the idea of doing a cover on this, but apparently I think it was Eddie Kramer who was the producer, and he also produced a lot of those early Kiss records. He convinced him to do a cover, and so he did. And I like it. He also played this one when I saw him live, and I really, really enjoyed it. but something about it is a lot different than all the other stuff on the album. It almost feels like it has a disco feel to it, which is kind of strange, but it's incredibly well done. And I'm going to say this right now, I have heard the original version, again, performed by Hello and written by Russ Ballard. I've heard it on YouTube. Ace's version is better in my personal opinion. I'm sure there's some people out there who will disagree with me, and that is perfectly fine, but I definitely prefer the Ace version, probably just because he makes music that I'm more inclined to like. So, yeah, it's a good cover. And here is a very, very fun fact. I mentioned earlier that Beth was the highest charting single by Kiss. New York Groove was the second highest charting single from what I understand. And what's very interesting is these two songs that perform the best as singles are barely even Kiss songs. Peter Criss sang on Beth. He did nothing else. Paul, Ace, and Gene had nothing to do with it. And from what I understand, Peter's writing credit or writing contributions to Beth were minimal at best. New York Groove is a cover not written by anyone from Kiss. Ace performs on it, no one else. So it's also barely a Kiss song, which is really kind of interesting if you think about it. But that is New York Groove. Baby, I'm back in the New York Groove. Yeah, that was terrible. Sorry. I need to learn to stop singing and just keep my mouth shut. Maybe one day I'll learn, but it's not tonight. But then we move to I'm in Need of Love, which is a little bit slower. It's definitely more guitar-based than New York Groove. I mean, I don't hate New York Groove by any stretch of the imagination, but the lack of guitar work definitely is kind of it's definitely a weak point for me. But I'm in Need of Love definitely picks things right back up. I'm not sure if this one's really my favorite. It's a little too slow and doesn't quite have the punch that I'm looking for. It just doesn't flow as well as I would have liked it to, but it's still a very, very, very strong song, as is everything else on this record. Then we have Wiped Out, which starts out with an amazing drum intro by Anton Fig. I am assuming, I could be wrong, but it's really pretty good. It's a pretty simple song. It sounds, I don't know, it's very reminiscent to, I guess, 50s or 60s pop, I would guess, but it's really not like that at all. I mean, the rhythm kind of sounds like it, but this definitely has a more raw and aggressive feel to it, and for that, I really do like Wiped Out. The rhythm is great. The rhythm is actually pretty crazy in my opinion, but Ace is on point. Everyone who's playing on this is on point, and I really do love Wiped Out. And then Fractured Mirror is an instrumental. Gives Ace a chance to show off his guitar abilities, and he does a very, very good job. It's very slow, and it's actually very melodic, but there's something about it that I really, really appreciate, and I really do like it. But my favorite from side 2, kind of a tough one, I'm going to go with Fractured Mirror for now because, you know, it's not trying to overstay its welcome. It's not trying to be anything big. It's just trying to be a very melodic and very well-crafted guitar number, and I think it works very, very well. So that was the Ace Frehley solo album. He sings every song on here, except, of course, Fractured Mirror, which is an instrumental. But, again, before this, he had only sang on 2 Kiss songs, and so he was apparently very uncomfortable or not very confident with his singing ability, which is why he didn't sing on a lot of those early Kiss records. But, I mean, I think he does a fairly competent job. Now, is he a great vocalist? He's okay. I think out of the original 4, he is the weakest vocalist, but he totally makes that up because he's an amazing guitarist. And I'm going to say right now, and you probably already know this from my Kiss album ranking video, but this is easily the best out of the 4 solo 1978 Kiss records, okay? This ranked 8th in my Kiss ranking, and I would put this right up there with their classic material. In fact, I did put it above Dress to Kill, which is actually kind of saying something. This is the only one of the 4 Kiss solo records that I own on vinyl. I own all of them on CD. This is the only one I felt was worth buying on vinyl. Now, Paul's solo album is okay. I guess it sounds the most quote-unquote Kiss-like out of the 4, but some of the songs are kind of flat, and the songwriting is not really his best. Jeans is bad. There are a few bright spots, such as Radioactive and Burning Up with Fever, and maybe his re-recording of See You in Your Dreams, but it's not that great. But it sounds a lot like 50s pop, which isn't very good in my opinion, and the songwriting is pretty lackluster. Peter's is unlistenable. I absolutely despise Peter's solo album, and that's kind of a shame because I think they made the solo albums because of him, but it's really more R&B and jazz, which is really not what I'm into when I think of Kiss, and I absolutely do recommend the Ace Frehley solo album. I think it is a great solo effort, and I think it is just as good as the albums that Kiss is most well known for. And so that is going to conclude my review for tonight. Thank you all for joining me. Next time, we're gonna take a look at one of my very best friends. But until then, have a very pleasant evening.